When my attorney walked into that hospital room 3 days later with the revised will and a check for $847,000, the looks on my two oldest sons' faces made every cold night on that waiting room bench worth it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this all began, to the moment I decided to find out what my children were really made of. My name is Richard Castellano, and for 42 years, I built Castellano Industrial Supply from a single warehouse in Newark into a company with 17 locations across the Northeast. I worked 16-hour days, missed countless Little League games, school plays, and family dinners. But I told myself it was worth it because I was building something for my children. My 3 sons would never have to struggle like I did, growing up in a cramped apartment above my father's failing grocery store. Marcus, my oldest at 38, followed in my footsteps. Harvard MBA, sharp as they come. He ran the Boston division and lived in a brownstone in Back Bay with his wife, a woman who wore shoes that cost more than my first car. David, 35, took a different path. Stanford Law, made partner at Morrison and Fletcher before he was 33. His penthouse in Manhattan had views of Central Park. And then there was Tommy, my youngest at 31. Tommy never wanted the corporate life. He became a high school history teacher in a struggling district in Paterson, New Jersey, made $54,000 a year and drove a 10-year-old Honda. I retired at 68, sold the company for a number that would make your head spin, and settled into a quiet life in my home in Montclair. The house was too big for one person, but it held memories of my late wife, Catherine, and I couldn't let it go. The boys visited. Sure, Marcus came by quarterly for lunch, usually with some investment opportunity he thought I should consider. David made it twice a year, always apologizing about his schedule. Tommy showed up every Sunday for dinner with his wife, Elena, a nurse who worked the night shift at St. Mary's. They'd bring groceries and Tommy would fix things around the house I didn't even know were broken. Here's what made me decide to run my test. Last Thanksgiving, I invited all 3 sons and their families. Marcus arrived 2 hours late, took 3 phone calls during dinner, and left before dessert because he had an emergency meeting. David came alone because his wife was in the Maldives with her friends, stayed for exactly 90 minutes, and spent most of it checking his phone. Tommy and Elena brought homemade pumpkin pie and stayed to help clean up, laughing and telling stories about Tommy's students until almost midnight. As I watched my Mercedes taillights disappear down my driveway that night, Marcus and David racing back to their important lives, I realized something that made my chest tight. I had given my sons everything, but I had no idea what they'd give back when I had nothing. So I made a plan, a test. Some people might call it cruel, but I call it necessary. I started my test on a Monday morning in March. I called Marcus first, my voice shaking just enough to sound genuine. Son, I need you to come to Mountainside Hospital right away. I'm in the emergency room. He arrived within 2 hours. I'll give him that. Found me in a curtained bay, wearing a hospital gown, looking pale and frightened. The ER doctor I'd paid to play along stood beside my bed with a clipboard, his face appropriately grave. Dad, what happened? Marcus asked, but his eyes kept darting to his Apple Watch. Heart attack, I said weakly. Or they think it was. Dr. Morrison here says I need emergency surgery, a triple bypass. Dr. Morrison nodded solemnly. We need to operate within the next 48 hours. The blockages are severe. Jesus, Dad. Marcus ran his hand through his hair, the same gesture he'd made since he was 12. Okay. What's the insurance situation? This is where it got interesting. That's the problem, I said, and I let my voice crack. Marcus, I made a mistake. A big one. You remember that investment opportunity Victor Petrov brought me last year? Marcus's face went very still. The tech startup in Palo Alto. You said you were putting in $200,000. I put in everything, I whispered. The company went bankrupt 3 months ago. The bankruptcy attorney says I might get 40 cents on the dollar in 2 years. Maybe. And my health insurance? I let it lapse while I was trying to sort out the financial mess. I was going to reinstate it, but then this happened. The silence in that curtain bay was thick enough to cut. How much does the surgery cost? Marcus asked finally. Dr. Morrison consulted his clipboard. With the surgical team, the hospital stay, the post-operative care, we're looking at $287,000. Mr. Castellano could qualify for emergency Medicaid, but the application process takes weeks. He doesn't have weeks. I watched my oldest son's face carefully, watched the calculations happening behind his eyes. Marcus was worth at least $8 million, and that was a conservative estimate. Dad, he said slowly, that's a huge amount of money. I mean, I have responsibilities. The business. Alexandra's parents are getting older. We just bought the summer house in the Hamptons. I'd have to talk to my financial advisor, but I could probably lend you, say, $50,000? That would be a start, right? $50,000 out of $8 million, less than 1% of his wealth, for his father's life. You'd have to pay me back, of course, he added quickly. Once you get the insurance sorted out, or the bankruptcy money comes through. I draw up a promissory note. Nothing personal, just business. You taught me that, right? Never mix family and money. I had taught him that. God help me, I had. Marcus stayed another 20 minutes, made some calls to explore options, then left because he had a meeting with a potential investor. He promised he'd circle back by the end of the week. He patted my hand once before he left, and it felt like a stranger's touch. I lay in that hospital bed for 3 hours after he left, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the holes in them. 467 holes in one tile. In case you're wondering, that's how you fill the time when you're waiting to see if your child loves you or loves your money. David arrived that evening. He'd taken the train from Penn Station, billable hours ticking away with every mile. I went through the same story, the same doctor, the same desperate situation. My lawyer's son listened with his lawyer face on, the one that gave nothing away. Have you consulted with a medical malpractice attorney? Was his first question. Because if they're pressuring you into expensive procedures without proper insurance verification, that's actionable. David, I need heart surgery. I need $287,000. Can you help me? He sighed, the kind of sigh that said he was dealing with someone who didn't understand how the world worked. Dad, I'm not liquid right now. Most of my money is tied up in the partnership, in real estate, in long-term investments. I could liquidate some positions, but I'd take a massive tax hit. We're talking hundreds of thousands in penalties and fees. I could die, I said quietly. You're not going to die. He said it with absolute certainty, like he was arguing before a judge. Here's what we're going to do. I'll talk to some people, see if we can negotiate the hospital bill down. Medical debt is negotiable. Most people don't know that. We could probably get them down to $150,000, maybe less. Then you file for medical bankruptcy. It's not ideal, but it protects your remaining assets. I could maybe contribute $20,000 toward a payment plan. But Dad, you have to understand, Melissa and I are trying for a baby. IVF isn't cheap. We're looking at $30,000 per cycle, and we might need multiple cycles. $20,000 for a baby that didn't exist yet, while his father lay dying. I'm really sorry about the Petrov thing, David added, checking his Rolex. You should have consulted with me before making that investment. I could have vetted it, seen the red flags, but you've always been stubborn about asking for advice. He left at 8:47 p.m. I know, because I watched the clock above the nurse's station. He had to catch the 9:15 train back to Manhattan. He had a deposition in the morning. 2 sons, 2 rejections. My chest actually hurt, and for a moment I wondered if I was giving myself a real heart attack with this charade. The nurse I'd hired to be part of my test came in around 10 o'clock. Her name was Ruth, and she'd worked with Dr. Morrison for 15 years. She handed me a sandwich from the cafeteria, turkey and Swiss on rye. Mr. Castellano, she said softly, are you sure you want to continue with this? I unwrapped the sandwich. It was dry and cold, but I ate it anyway. I need to know, I told her. I need to know if I raised at least one good man. I called Tommy the next morning. He was in the middle of teaching a class on the Civil War, but when I said I was in the hospital, he told his students to read chapter 12 and drove straight to Mountainside. He still had chalk dust on his pants when he burst through the curtain. Dad, oh my God, Dad. He grabbed my hand, and his palm was sweating. What happened? Are you okay? Where's Elena? Should I call Elena? Elena was in on it. She had to be, because Tommy told her everything. But she'd agreed to let this play out, to let me see who my youngest son really was. I went through the story again. The bad investment, the lapsed insurance, the surgery I needed, the money I didn't have. Tommy's face went white, then red, then white again. $287,000, he repeated. He sat down hard in the plastic chair beside my bed. Jesus, Dad, Jesus. Then he did something that made my throat close up. He pulled out his phone and started calling. First, the bank. Hi, this is Thomas Castellano. I need to know the current balance in my savings account and how quickly I can access it. A pause. 47,000. Okay. And my checking? Another pause. 3,200. What about my 401k? I know there's penalties, but what if I withdraw it all right now? He listened, scribbling numbers on the back of a patient information pamphlet. His hand was shaking. Okay, so with the 401k, after penalties and taxes, maybe another 60,000. So total liquid assets around $109,000. He looked up at me. Dad, I can get you $109,000 by tomorrow. That's not enough, but it's a start. Elena's got maybe $12,000 in her savings, so that's $121,000. Tommy, that's your whole life savings. That's your retirement, your emergency fund, everything you and Elena have worked for. You're my father, he said simply. Like that explained everything. And maybe it did. He kept making calls, called his principal. Mr. Rodriguez, I need to take a personal leave starting immediately. It's a family emergency. Called Elena. Baby, I need you to come to Mountainside Hospital. Dad needs surgery, and I'm going to sell the car. Yeah, the Honda. I know we need it, but we can take the bus for a while. Dad needs us. Then he did something that broke me completely. He worked his wedding ring off his finger. It was a simple gold band, nothing fancy. They'd bought matching ones at a jewelry store in Patterson for $200 each. He'd worn it for 7 years. The pawn shop on Main Street, he said. More to himself than to me. They'd give me maybe $150 for this. Every bit helps. Tommy, no. I couldn't keep the tears out of my voice anymore. Not your wedding ring. Elena will understand, he said. She'd do the same thing. Dad, when Mom was dying, you spent every last dollar on her treatment. You took out a second mortgage on the house. You would have sold everything you owned. We're Castellanos. That's what we do. He stayed with me for the next 6 hours, making plans, making lists, calling everyone he knew who might be able to lend money. He called his college roommate, his department head, even the guy who sold him his car. By midnight, he'd scraped together promises for another $23,000 in loans from friends and family. I know it's not enough, he said, exhausted, his head in his hands. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I can't save you. I've failed you. You haven't failed me, I whispered. Tommy, you could never fail me. Elena arrived around 1 a.m., still in her scrubs from her shift. She hugged Tommy, then me, and her eyes were red. Mr. Castellano, she said, we're going to figure this out. I talked to my supervisor. Street Mary's has a hardship fund for employees' families. It's not much, maybe $5,000, but every bit counts, and I can pick up double shifts for the next 6 months. We'll make this work. They curled up together in the visitor chairs, Tommy's arm around his wife, both of them sleeping fitfully, ready to give everything they had for a father who didn't deserve a son that good. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay there in the dark, listening to the hospital sounds, thinking about the 2 successful sons who'd offered me crumbs and the struggling teacher who'd offered me his whole world. At 7 a.m., I called my attorney, James Whitmore. He arrived at 8:30 with his briefcase and his knowing smile. James had been my lawyer for 23 years. He'd known about the test from the beginning. Tommy woke up when James walked in. Who's this? He asked, groggy, protective. Tommy, I said, I need you to wake up Elena. I need both of you to hear something. They stood beside my bed, holding hands, looking confused and worried. James opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. There was no bad investment, I said. Victor Petrov's company is doing fine. I made $2.3 million on that investment. My health insurance never lapsed. It's platinum-level coverage through Empire Blue Cross. And I don't need heart surgery. Doctor, Morrison ran every test in the book yesterday. My heart is perfect for a 69-year-old man. This was all a test. Tommy's face went through about 17 different emotions in 3 seconds. A test? I needed to know, I said. I needed to know what my sons were really made of. I needed to know if I'd raised good men, or just successful ones. Elena's mouth dropped open. Tommy just stared at me like he'd never seen me before. You were willing to give me everything, I continued. Your savings, your retirement, your car, your wedding ring. You were ready to go into debt, to change your whole life. For me, your brothers couldn't spare more than $70,000 between them, and even that came with conditions and resentment. James pulled more papers from his briefcase. Mr. Castellano has asked me to revise his will and estate plan. He wanted to wait until after this test to make final decisions. I don't want to hear this, Tommy said, backing away. Dad, I don't want your money. That's not why I wasn't. Oh God. He looked like he might throw up. Listen to me, I said firmly. Marcus runs his division of my old company. He'll keep doing that, and he'll keep his current compensation package. He's good at what he does. David has his law career. He doesn't need my help. But you, Tommy, you and Elena work yourselves to exhaustion for pennies. You live in a one-bedroom apartment in a building with rats. Elena drives 30 miles to work because you can't afford to live closer to the hospital. You deserve better. James handed me the document. The estate is worth approximately $47 million after taxes and sale of the business. Under the new will, Marcus and David each receive $500,000. That's more than generous considering the advantages they've already had. Thomas receives the house in Montclair, the vacation property in Maine, and the remainder of the liquid assets. Approximately $43. 2 millions. Tommy's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the floor. Elena made a sound like all the air had left her body. Additionally, James continued, Mr. Castellano is establishing the Catherine Castellano Foundation with an initial endowment of $5 million. Thomas will serve as director, with a salary of $120,000 per year. The foundation will provide college scholarships to students in underserved communities. Your father thought you'd be good at that. I can't, Tommy said. His voice was barely a whisper. Dad, that's not fair to Marcus and David. They're my sons, I agreed. And I love them. But love isn't about fairness. It's about recognizing who shows up, who sacrifices, who offers their last dollar and their wedding ring. That's you, Tommy. That's always been you. We had what you might call a family meeting 3 days later. I checked out of the hospital and returned to my house in Montclair. The same dining room where we'd had that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner became the scene of what I can only describe as a reckoning. Marcus arrived first, in his Tesla, with Alexandra. He was carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost $400. David came 20 minutes later, apologizing about traffic from the city. Tommy and Elena were already there. They'd arrived at noon to help me set up, even though I kept telling them it wasn't necessary. I'd asked James to present the new will. I wanted them to hear it from him. Officially, legally, no room for argument. Marcus went very pale as James read through the provisions. This is insane, he said when James finished. Dad, you're giving him everything? Because of some test? Because he had $109,000 in his savings account and I was being financially responsible? You were being financially selfish, I corrected. I was dying, or you thought I was, and you offered me less than 1% of your wealth, with conditions, with a promissory note. That's business. Marcus stood up, his face red. You taught me that. You always said keep business and family separate. Don't lend money to family. Make everything official. I also taught you that family comes first, I said quietly. Did I not model that? Did I not work myself to the bone for you? Did I not pay for Harvard? For your first apartment? For your wedding? When you wanted to invest in that condo development in Providence and needed $200,000, did I ask you to sign a promissory note? Silence. Alexandra was studying her hands. David was more controlled, but I could see the lawyer in him analyzing angles. If you're truly dying, this will is vulnerable to challenge. It could be argued you made it under duress, or that Thomas exercised undue influence. I'm not dying, I reminded him, and I'm of completely sound mind. James had me evaluated by 3 separate doctors. The will is bulletproof. I made sure of it. This is about punishing us, David said, because we didn't react the way you wanted during your little theater production. No, I said. This is about rewarding the son who did react the right way. There's a difference. Tommy had been quiet through all of this, but now he spoke up. Dad, I need to say something. He looked at his brothers. I'm sorry. I know this isn't fair. I know you're angry, but I didn't know about any of this. I thought Dad was dying. I was trying to save him. With our inheritance, Marcus snapped. It wasn't the inheritance, Tommy said. It was Dad. It was my father. What's money compared to that? Easy to say when you're getting $43 million, David muttered. I stood up then, old and tired, but still taller than both of them. You want to know the real tragedy here? Tommy would have done the exact same thing if the will had stayed the way it was. If he was getting the same amount as you, he would have given everything because that's who he is. That's what your mother and I tried to teach you. Somewhere along the way, you two learned to count dollars and forgot to count what matters. Marcus grabbed his wife's hand. We're leaving. Come on, Alexandra. Wait, I said. I'm not done. You're still my sons. You're still welcome in this house. I still love you. But you need to understand something. I worked my whole life to build something to give you. But what I really wanted to give you was character. Tommy got that. You got the money instead. And look how that turned out. They left. Both of them, within minutes of each other. Mercedes and BMW. Expensive cars disappearing down the driveway, just like Thanksgiving. Elena had tears running down her face. Tommy looked shell-shocked. I need some air, he said, and walked out to the back porch. I followed him. Found him standing by the garden his mother had planted, the roses she'd loved, looking out at nothing. I don't know how to process this, he said. 4 days ago, I was a high school teacher making $54,000 a year. Now I'm, what? A millionaire? The director of a foundation? Dad, I don't know how to be that person. You just be who you've always been, I said. You use the money to make a difference. You keep teaching, if you want. You help kids who are like you were, smart but without resources. You take care of Elena. You take care of me when I actually do get sick someday. You live a good life. Marcus and David hate me now. They hate the situation. Maybe someday they'll understand. Maybe they won't. But Tommy, I need you to hear me. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just yourself. That's all I ever wanted from any of you. That was 4 months ago. Tommy and Elena moved into the house in Montclair 2 months later. They're fixing it up, room by room. Elena's pregnant now, due in December. They're turning the guest room into a nursery. Tommy's taking a year off from teaching to set up the foundation. They've already awarded their first round of scholarships. 15 kids from Patterson who wouldn't have been able to afford college otherwise. Marcus calls once a month. The conversations are stiff, formal. He asks about my health, tells me about business. We're working towards something, maybe. David hasn't called at all. His secretary sends a birthday card, which feels worse than nothing. But you know what? Every Sunday, Tommy and Elena come for dinner. We sit in the dining room, the 3 of us now, soon to be 4 when the baby comes. We laugh and tell stories and make plans for the foundation. Last week, Tommy brought his old wedding ring. He'd bought it back from the pawn shop where he'd planned to sell it. I want our kid to know about this someday, he said, showing it to me. about the night I was ready to give up everything for you. I want them to understand that's what love looks like. That's what love looks like. Not a promissory note or a negotiated hospital bill. Not a percentage or a tax strategy. Love is a wedding ring you're ready to pawn. Love is $109,000 you don't really have. Love is sleeping in a hospital chair when you could be home in bed. I'm getting older. The ache in my joints is real now, even if the heart attack wasn't. Someday, probably sooner than I'd like, I'll need the kind of care I faked needing during my test. And when that day comes, I know exactly who'll be there. I know whose hand I'll be holding. I know who'll fight for me, sacrifice for me, love me even when I'm difficult and demanding and more trouble than I'm worth. It won't be the sons with the Harvard MBA and the law degree. It'll be the high school teacher with chalk dust on his pants and love in his heart. That's what I learned from my test. That's what my wife Catherine tried to tell me for years, back when she was alive. Success isn't about the size of your bank account or the prestige of your degree. It's about who you are when everything's on the line. It's about what you'd give up for the people you love. Marcus and David are successful, but Tommy, my youngest, my teacher, my son who was ready to give everything, he's good, and in the end, isn't that all any father really wants?